Our first honoree is George Cregg Jr., partner at Hodgkin Russell.
Yeah.
Over his 40-year career in IDA practice, George has left an indelible mark on our membership. His practice started with his father, George W. Cregg Sr., recognized draftsman of the original IDA statute, and also a Lifetime Achievement honoree from the NYSEDC. So I think this might actually be our first father-son duo to receive the award with our organization. George has been a regular at NYSEDC programs, speaking to our board members about the new laws, bills, regulations, and advising IDAs on how they can best comply. He has worked with the NYSEDC staff for over 30 years regarding legislative initiatives, drafting memos in support, and in some cases in opposition of specific bills. He has helped the NYSEDC draft legislation and has attended advocacy sessions with the Assembly, the Senate, and Executive Chamber. He has served as a resource to countless IDA directors and staff throughout his career. George also received his undergraduate degree from the University of Notre Dame, so go Fighting Irish, and his law degree from Cornell University right here in New York. George has left his mark on the NYSEDC and has been a true friend and a resource to me in my short tenure here. There is no doubt that the IDA community is in a better place because of his knowledge, his assistance, his friendship, and his service to the economic development community. That's why it's my pleasure to present George W. Cregg Jr. with the 2019 Brian McMahon Lifetime.
Somebody was kind enough to tell me this week after the other day, so I did put a few words together. First off, I want to say it's a great pleasure that I received this award for the New York State Economic Development Council. This organization was one of the first professional organizations that I joined when I started practicing law in the early 1970s. I'm grateful to Ryan for shaving about 5 years off my I was introduced, as Ryan indicated, to this great organization by my father, who some of you may know was the principal author of what we now know as the New York State Industrial Development Agency Act. That act authorized the creation of industrial development agencies in New York State. When I asked my father how he came to write the legislation, he told me that he had become aware that some southern states were successfully using tax-exempt revenue bond financing to lure New York State manufacturers into moving out of the state. He further told me that he was upset to discover that New York State was one of the few states not empowered to use tax-exempt revenue bond financing to encourage such businesses to modernize their facilities and remain in the state. At the time, Nelson Rockefeller was the governor, and my father decided we should ask the governor's favorite bond attorney to write and get enacted legislation authorizing these bonds in New York State. That attorney was John Mitchell, who at the time was a highly respected bond attorney in New York City, and who later became somewhat infamous as Nixon's first attorney general. At a mid-1960s dinner with John Mitchell in New York City, my father asked John to draft the required legislation, and John refused, telling my father that since my father felt so strongly about the matter, my father should draft the legislation. Having been challenged, my father began drafting the legislation, and he worked closely with this great organization, which at the time was known by the lovely name of the New York State Association of Industrial Development Agencies, to get the legislation through the New York State Legislature. As you are aware, the state legislature did adopt the legislation in the late 1960s, and John Mitchell supported approval of the legislation by Governor Rockefeller. Over the years, industrial development agencies have faced potential legislative or bureaucratic proposals that could potentially cripple their effectiveness. In the 1970s, it was competitive bidding. In the 1980s, it was the tax department which had hostility to receive abuses of sales tax exemptions. In the 1990s, it was legislative efforts to reform IDA practices. In the 2000s, it was legislative efforts to reform public authorities. And now, of course, you face legislative efforts to investigate IDAs and to expand the prevailing wage laws to cover all projects receiving governmental incentives. The New York State